What's up, Denver? Chris Lopez, and today we're doing a podcast on our portfolio analysis series, and we're specifically going to a new feature that is very much near and dear to Chelsea. Chelsea, good afternoon.
Hey, Chris, how's it going?
Really good.
Yeah, awesome.
So this is something we're going to talk about for a bit on here, on something that you like to do, you've implemented into the process.
Yep.
So first off, I didn't tell what it was. What are we going to talk about today?
So it's called a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, or SWOT analysis. And if you ever look it up or you Google it, it's pretty boring. Some of the videos out there, they're used in big corporate settings. Companies use them to evaluate larger deals, and they're, they take a little bit of time, but they really give you a new perspective on the property. And I happen to be a fan. I used it in a previous life when I was analyzing affordable housing units, and they were really valuable for affordable housing builders. They really wanted to see some of the strengths and opportunities and threats that were in and around those particular locations. And so I thought this would be great for a lot of reasons. But the main reason is that we just finished a live cast, you and I, and we were looking at a client's portfolio, and I'm actually utilizing that same client portfolio in this conversation because I'm using this for them in order to evaluate if they should sell a property, 1031 it, or increase the market rents. And I wanted to look at all the different positive and negative features of the property in order to give the full picture to this client. And so with that, we're going to get into the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And also, I do want to mention that if you ever use this in business school, this is a very common business school exercise that people go through.
Oh, I think
you learn about this.
I've definitely read textbooks and been in
Right?
classes where we've done these exercises.
Yep.
And
The grid.
Yep.
The 4 squares.
And before we jump into this, you referenced the show we did. That was on the Drinks and Deep Dive show from July 14th, talking about 2 fourplexes. And that podcast should be out around July 22nd on there.
Great.
Don't have the final title on yet since we just recorded it, but that will kind of link the two together, kind of see what that property is like. And now here's a different view using the SWOT analysis.
Totally.
So it's going to be really cool to kind of stack them together.
And you can, if you watch them, one after the other, that should make a little bit more sense. And we're all primed and ready on this topic, so we have a little bit of a runway here. So let's just talk about some of the high points of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So strengths are like, basically, when you think of the strength of a property, you think of things like location, condition, rentability, amenities, which comes back to the location, and which then translates into low vacancy. When you think about weaknesses, I tend to think about unit size. I don't know that that's what everybody really thinks of out of the gate when they think of a weakness, but especially during COVID, when people wanted to work or were working from home, the office space, the 3rd bedroom, that was a huge asset for some people. And having a 3-bedroom unit could really help with a renter, especially if they were leaving the urban core. They might want to find a 3-bedroom unit. And so I also believe that, especially room by room, that some of the bigger units just give you more options. Excessive CapEx, that can be a weakness that comes with the property. You know that it needs some renovation, some rehab, and you may not have that out of pocket to spend on the property. Low rents, you happen to be in a neighborhood where the rents just aren't really very high for the average in the neighborhood or maybe in the entire city or county. And then a low cap rate, right? I mean, compressed cap rates, some people consider that a weakness within their property. Opportunities, we're going to focus a lot on that. So I just put a big circle around that one right there. That's really where we're going to focus in this podcast. Opportunities include future growth in the area, becoming a TOD, which that means a transit-oriented development site, excessive equity in a property.
Say that again. What's TOD?
Transit-oriented development. So a TOD is a development that was literally put in, oriented around the new transit, so the light rail.
Okay.
The light rail or the bus system. So, and TODs became a really popular phrase for developers when the light rail came in.
Yeah. Okay.
So they were like building TODs. Excessive equity in a property, that can be an opportunity, and then any value add pieces, right? So in the case of that, back to that 3-bedroom example, you could turn that into an office. That's a potential quick value add in like a condo or a single family home. Threats, it's a no growth area, which is something that, again, when we get into the opportunity section, we're going to touch on that as well. Crime, and that was a big part of what we did in affordable housing. We looked at the crime maps and the heat maps as to where the crime was really prevalent. And if you're in a building or somewhere where there's a lot of crime, that's something definitely to consider as to how you manage that property. High taxes and flat rents. So if a lot of people are talking about new assessments, people have gotten their assessments this year after the 2-year period, and as happy as we are with appreciation, they're not as happy with taxes. So that could become a threat, right, to your cash flow, to your property, something that you may cause you to want to make a move. And then flat rents are a little bit different than low rents. Sometimes you're in a location where the rents just aren't hitting the average, but sometimes you're in a place where they just won't move,
Yep.
And the property we're going to look at, this one in Loveland, that's kind of the case. They're kind of flat. It's kind of in a little bit of a place where ingress is not that great, not super close to a highway or any particular, location of any substantial growth. It's kind of a fourplex tucked away in a residential neighborhood. It just doesn't have a lot of indicators that show that rent's going to change. So, okay. Ooh, I have the control. That's right. Okay. So we're going to look at this. This is the fourplex I mentioned. It's again on that other deep dives that you mentioned from July 14th. If you want to pull that, and in tandem with this will give you even a bigger look at this property. This is a fourplex. They're all 2-bed, 1 baths. I put strength on there. I circled the S part of this property because the other property this client owns has some 2 beds and some 1 beds, and I didn't think that was as strong as the 2 beds. So I like the unit size mix in this fourplex. Opportunity, definitely the equity that's involved in this property is really substantial. It's about around $450,000, a little bit over that. It's a great opportunity to make some changes. Weaknesses, it's an under-rented property, again, in a flat rent area, so that can be a challenge. And then threats, the cap rate. There are many people that bench the performance of their portfolios and their individual properties on the cap rate, and that cap rate is relatively low, and so that's something that could be considered a threat. So I wanted to do this to kind of show how you would on a spreadsheet on the numbers side actually start to identify those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Like you could literally circle or highlight different parts of your own spreadsheet to say like, well, what's going on in here, based on just the numbers, not even anything else. Okay. This is a little overwhelming and you probably can't see it on your screen. So I'm just going to make that assumption and just kind of talk you through it. So this is something that I have embedded in the portfolio analysis spreadsheet. So it's something that I can do with a client. And I actually did this for this particular fourplex. So I actually went in and I did the numbers to kind of show you the results of, my thought on this fourplex, because I'm literally working with this client right now and walking through all the steps with them. So this served dual purposes. It served as a good example to share today. And it also is something I'm literally working with this person on. So I went in and there are a whole set of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats listed here, and I'll just highlight a few. We've talked about cap rate, your NOI to purchase rate ratio at the moment, your cash flow, location, property size. Is it walkable? Does it have a walkability, which is something you can check, by the way, on a website called walkscore.com. It's a great website. I highly recommend it. It really tells you how accessible your property is to services, to public transportation, to major highways. It's a really cool site. If is it near trails and parks? Is there equity in the property? Can you leverage it? I did include some markers that we used to use in affordable housing, like asbestos, ground floor versus third floor. This mattered in affordable because sometimes, number one, it was a rehab and there would be massive amounts of asbestos, and how doing a rehab with that type of abatement could really add cost to the project. And then ground floor matter because there would be sometimes handicapped people and seniors. And so sometimes the accessibility needed to be there. And so, that also could matter for just non-handicap. That could matter because you have a family and they don't want to walk up flights of stairs to put their groceries away.
Yep.
Things like that. Things like adequate parking, on-site amenities. Is it in need of major repair? Quality of tenants in the neighborhood? Those are kind of fall into the strengths and weaknesses. So I went in and I put in what I felt were the appropriate numbers for this particular property, and I rate them on a 1 to 5 scale.
And before you, let me pause just to paint a picture for people listening here, because you basically have 4 sections from the spreadsheet here. Mm-hmm. One is strengths with 14 items listed.
Yep.
Weaknesses, 13 items. Mm-hmm. Opportunities and threats are 8 or 9 items each as well. Mm-hmm. And then you're saying each one you assign a rating of 1 to 5 to.
Correct. That's perfect. Thank you, Chris. That was a great recap. So it's basically like going in and saying at, where do you think your property falls? And it is subjective. So I want to mention that. This is what you as the owner, as the person that's evaluating this property is saying, and or in this case, I did it for that person. Looking at the property, looking at photos of the property, looking at its location. I went in and I put down numbers that I felt made sense. And I also had all the details of this person's spreadsheet, right? I had all their numbers. So one thing I want to point out is in the example of weaknesses, asbestos and ground floor doesn't matter here. It's not relevant. So I didn't put a 0 on there. I just put a dash, right? So I wanted to note that sometimes some of these are not going to be relevant and you just eliminate them out of the equation. There are also the number of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that I put in here are not a set number. You could go in there and replace this particular quality with another quality, or you could eliminate, like I said, qualities that aren't going to be impactful. And so what happened here is when I looked at this property, it turned out that the opportunities section was the strongest section of these 4 different markers. It had the highest rating. It was closest to 5. So that means a lot of my numbers that I populated in there were 4s and 5s. The average is 4.5. So it's telling me that I want to look at the opportunities here. What are the opportunities? Future development in the area, increasing rent was an opportunity, remodeling the property, leveraging up, being near transit oriented, that was actually low, that's not there, converting it to Section 8, and is it an area of increased density? There are some of those markers that are somewhat occurring, and we're going to get into that. We're going to show that because like I mentioned, the opportunity section after seeing these results is where I really focused this podcast. And I also wanted to walk viewers through how you can actually look into opportunities because there's some really cool websites we're going to go through as to how you can actually evaluate the opportunities of your property. And so this to me is a really interesting way when you're on the fence about what to do with the property to look at it off the spreadsheet. Like off the grid, right? Like off the spreadsheet. Like let's jump off the spreadsheet and go into reality and let's see if what we think in our minds is actually what this is telling us. Okay.
So go back to that slide, please. So on this property, you weighted all the, I call them qualities for each one of the sections: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. 1 through 5. Then you took a average rating for each section.
Correct.
So the average rating for strengths was 3.2.
Yep.
Weaknesses was 3.0. Threats was 2.9. Opportunities was 4.5.
Right.
So those are numbers that average all out. That's there. 3.2 for strengths, 4.5 for opportunities, 2.9 for threats, and 3.0 for weaknesses.
So let's say it was reversed and that threats were 4.5. That would mean that I think that there are quite a few threats coming in and around this property, right? Like the higher the number, the like more of an outstanding situation. So it's like, wow, this property is a 5 on the strengths. That means it has, great rents. It's in a great location. It's got low capex. It's got great marketability. It's low vacancy. All these big markers are standing there like, this is a great property. Like we don't even need to really discuss this property, it's a 5.0. And I did want to mention too, anyone who's going to really, maybe do some additional research on a SWOT. So strengths and weaknesses are the internal factors in the property. So it's actually like, think of the property as a person. It's what the strengths and weaknesses are of that person or that property.
Okay.
Whereas the opportunities and threats are what's going on out and around outside of them. Like threats are not within the property itself. It's not like, oh, the roof is going to collapse, right? That's an internal, that's a weakness. An external threat is like the property manager's not working out well, or the school district just went down. It's things that are outside the property that you can't control, right? Like the future development in and around the property, that's an opportunity. That's around the property. So internal, external. Okay. So I wanted to provide 2 resources that you can use to really start to identify those external factors to the property that are going to affect your actual, your actual income. So comprehensive plans. I don't know how many people check them, are familiar with them, or have looked at them, but they are available on the webs, on like city, county websites, depending on your jurisdiction. And you can easily access them by Googling the name of your neighborhood. Sometimes they're neighborhood too. Sometimes they're neighborhood comprehensive plans. Your neighborhood, your city, your county, and you can Google that, and then it will bring you right to the most recent up-to-date comprehensive plan. And what is a comprehensive plan? We're going to look at that a little bit further in some future slides. But that's basically the city's ultimate plan, or the county, as to what they're going to do in and around all the different pockets of that particular location that they oversee. There are council members that sit on different councils in different districts that actually like oversee this and update this and then put resources behind it. So you can find out what's actually going in and around the neighborhood. You can find out if it's growth, pro-growth, or no growth. You can find out if they have a particular bend on, we really plan on increasing affordable housing in this particular area. We actually plan on bringing in new businesses into this location. We're going to create more transit, right? You can find out all of those things and you can see how close that falls in your immediate area. The second one is that I'm a huge fan of Facebook Marketplace for rent checking. I don't know. I mean, there are so many different places you can go, and there are some really obvious ones that I think a lot of people check, like they go to Zillow or they go to apartments.com or they go to other sources. But here's why I like Facebook. They give you a map like this. So it's not just showing you the rents. You can actually click in and around your particular property. So you can say like, it's great that someone tells you that the average rent in this location is this, but now I can go in and actually see what people are charging in and around my property. So this Loveland property was located there. So I pulled up a map of just the particular rent indicators there. And that can be a great way to see your rent potential based on the comps in your immediate area. So those are two different resources that I would suggest to check some of the opportunities that are particular to this property. Opportunities being what's happening in the area of that location, and then what are your rent potential? What's your rent potential? Okay, this is a lot of colors. But
yeah, so this is a map of, I guess that's Loveland, right? Yeah, there's
is.
Loveland Lake. So this must be from the comprehensive plan.
It is.
Because it's got just a huge, the map with a huge overlay of different colors and swash marks to tell us, I guess, what the plan is, right?
What's going on there. Yep, exactly. So what this is telling us, and I wanted to highlight this, is it's telling us where future growth is occurring and the type of future growth. So for example, you probably can't see this, but the orange, what should look like orange on your screen, those are called high density residential areas. And so I consider that, or maybe medium density, to kind of be in this client's wheelhouse of what they want to look at. They want to look at medium to high density growth because they're in a fourplex. Probably falls more under medium, but Loveland doesn't have a ton of multifamily in the area where his fourplex is. So you might want to consider that high density for that particular region. So I want to point out that not only do you have that, but you also have other activity that's going on. Like the red are regional activity centers, which could mean future walking shopping malls or future business locations. There are also areas of employment growth. And for example, in Loveland, there's a lot going on in and around the airport. And there's also a lot going on in the cross of 34, which runs east and west, and I-25, which runs north and south. So that's a major intersection where there's a lot of things going on. You can see it's really bright red all in and around where those two major thoroughfares cross. And so that is kind of like where I would say that's where you want to be. That's where you want to invest, is kind of right in there. And the other places of growth is you can sort of start drilling into what does that growth look like, and does it fit the bill of what I'm doing? And it could mean one of two things. If it's a type of growth that's going to actually support your investment, like whether it's employment hubs or it's shopping centers or it's just a more robust location, that's going to bolster your unit. But if it's more multifamily growth and you're going to have more competition, that's actually now a threat. So understanding this map, and to show how detailed these maps can be. And then, by the way, the comprehensive plan then goes into much more detail on all of this. So you can really read about each individual section. And the best part about it is these are objective writers. These are urban planners. These are people that are not looking at this as an investment map. They're looking at it.
Oh, yeah, they're just providing the data and the research.
They're just providing the information. So you're not looking at it from like somebody telling you like, oh, invest here, invest there. You're actually deducing that from here. So it's really just a great educational resource to understand your location. So this is what I was talking about, I-25 and US 34. This is that cross of commercial. They actually did a SWOT on this themselves. And one of the strengths they came up with were the strong, exiting customer base in that area, the promenade shops at Centera, high levels of visibility and access to I-25, proximity to ingress egress. The presence of the medical center of the Rockies draws additional people throughout the region, a large amount of undeveloped land, 340 acres. So we're going to go back to that cross, and I'm going to actually, can I point to this?
Yeah.
Will you guys see me if I go off here? So like we're talking about right here. So, sorry. Whoopsies.
So I know for a lot of people they can't see there, but kind of in the northeast section of Loveland, right off where it intersects 25.
Yep. So 25 and a little bit down is 34. If you can see that white mark, yep, there. It's where right. So right around there. So you have hospitals, you have the promenade, you have all 340 acres of undeveloped area, and you're close to the airport. There's just so much going in and around here that to me, this is just the area that I would hone in on. So this is something I'm going to share with the client. I haven't yet, but I'm going to, show this as kind of, the regional information that they need to consider. So now I'm going to switch gears slightly. And when I say switch gears, I mean, I'm going to go to a whole separate part of Colorado. And the reason I chose this is that this is a place where I just invested, and I'm really, really a huge fan of this location. I right now have one property here, and I'm aiming for two. I've tried. It's become incredibly competitive. I had spoken with a broker about one, and he basically had said, "You're totally in the running. Everything that you're putting on paper sounds good to me." And by the next morning, when the offers went to, it was an attorney review, went to the attorneys to look at, I was way underpriced. So this just continues to grow in popularity. And I wanted to show this because I've had clients ask me, like, what's Swansea? What is it? I haven't heard of it. Like, why are you choosing this? What's your reasoning? So this is the planning area for Swansea, which is a neighborhood that is northwest.
It's just north of 70, just east of 25. So the map on you're looking at, it shows Globeville.
Yep.
It shows Swansea, and that's what's really highlighting. So if you guys can type in Google Maps, but it's really just north of 70, just east of 25.
And it's Elria Swansea is the full name of the neighborhood. And I don't know that everybody knows this, but the reason Swansea is so great is that this black section, and Chris, I don't know if you can with the mouse just that's I-70 right there. That whole entire stretch of I-70 has been really heavily funded for redevelopment and is under redevelopment. And so there's just a lot of construction activity that's happening in and around I-70.
If anyone's not sure where this is, it's basically where the Purina puppy chow factory
It is.
Everyone knows where that one is.
And everyone can smell that as well. So there is that part. Okay, and then the National Western Center, the complex, if you look at that to the left in the orange, that is under also major redevelopment. And then I want to point out the 3 T's in and around the area. Those are the light rail stops. So there are 3 major light rail stops, not all within exact walking distance, but the one at the Western Center is definitely walking distance. Then you have one just on the other side of 70, and then you have one a little bit further south. And so this is a TOD site. This is an up and coming site. This has major development in and around the area. Globeville has already popped. Sunnyside has already popped. All these other neighborhoods are already well on their way. This is kind of a little bit of the laggard, and it could be because of the puppy chow, but it's definitely potentially a little bit of a laggard. And so I wanted to point that out because if you went to the comprehensive plan and you look at the planning area overview, you would read about this, and it is just chock full of information on everything that's happening in and around this area. And so this is where you get some of that insight, because most of these plans, by the way, were written like 5 to 10 years ago. So these are plans that are already well on their way, right? Like you'll see the date stamp will say, oh, this plan was written in 2015, 2017. So we're already in 2021. You're moving 4 to 8 years ahead. It's already down the line in what's happening. So I wanted to also circle those stations. So I was just mentioning, so transit residential area, that's what it's considered. It is a TOD site. And then you can see those major stops, 38th and Blake, over at the National Western Stock Show Complex, 40th and Colorado Station area. So it has that going for it as well. So that's just one example of how you can help to identify neighborhoods and look at all the opportunities that are actually occurring in that neighborhood based on the comprehensive plan or the neighborhood plan. It might also be called the neighborhood plan. So that's kind of it right now. I just kind of we can go back to the strengths, weaknesses section, but I just wanted to highlight the opportunity section because one, it's relevant for this client, but secondly, it also is something that people can easily do when they're looking at a property. It maybe takes 10 minutes, maybe take half an hour and read parts of the plan just to start to really familiarize yourself with what could be coming down the line and why you want to hold that property for a long time.
So for this Fourplex specifically, can you give us a rundown for, how this pans out? Like what did this analysis do to help the client who owns a fourplex?
Yeah. So
what were his takeaways?
Yeah. So the takeaways were that this particular property has the option for a remodel to bring it up to kind of more of its neighboring locations. Like if you look in and around, you really dive into that particular part of Loveland, you'll see that some of the property stock is just in better shape. And so it has the opportunity for a remodel or a value add. There's also, not as much future development or transit oriented stuff going on. So that wasn't a high marker, but they are in they do have a property that has the opportunity to pull the equity out as well. There's a substantial amount of equity, and that gives them a strong opportunity, and that they should start to look at some of the threats. Like most of the development is happening outside of where this property is located. Most of the growth and most of what's going on there is not in that area. It does have quite a few weaknesses in terms of its flat rents and what's happening there, and they're not seeing a lot of movement in that particular space. And then that some of the strengths are really centralized around the fact that it's been there for a long time. The tenants haven't turned over much, and it's kind of an easier play for this individual because they're more familiar with the property, but they're also just not seeing anything really good happen in terms of CapEx expenditures as well as rents. So it's really just showing like different markers of where things are really in bad shape. Like I gave on-site amenities a 1. Like there are no amenities at this property at all. And there's nothing to make it stand out around the other stock that's in and around its location. So it just can kind of show you like at a glance, like, oh, okay, where are my 5s? Where are my 1s? And everything else that falls in between, what should I be considering here?
So what's the actionable item the client will take away from this?
I think that what they'll take away is that they probably should either sell this property or at least try to increase the rents. And if they can't, maybe they need a remodel to do that. But, this probably isn't the best location in and around the Loveland area. Which
is one of the few things, location.
Yeah.
Can't change that.
Can't move it. Can't make new land. Well, at least not that we know of yet. But yeah, it's, yeah. So, I mean, I think the biggest takeaway too, though, is the more time you spend evaluating your properties, the more you see. Does that make sense? This is an exercise, like a checklist exercise of going through, is what you're thinking in your mind really translating on paper? And for this client, I think the answer is yes. They've spent a lot of money on it. They're not getting rent increases. It's not the best location. It has a ton of equity that's not working for them. They should move on.
Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely a great exercise for people to do and consider because it forces them to go through and think about items, but also forces people to quantify things, assign a 1 to 5 value on there.
Yeah. Which
is very like, oh yeah, well, it has this and this and this versus a mental checklist versus like writing it down. So I like that a lot. Because I think a lot of people, they will, do part of this just mentally, but actually doing a full exercise and quantifying it, it would be a great thing to do. Definitely seems like a great thing to do, like, on an annual basis, review your properties, do all this, get a feel for where things are going, and then put that in context with the market, your overall portfolio, your goals. But this can definitely help just quantify things and give you a little bit of a reality check.
And I really like to also just kind of reiterate the comprehensive plan or the neighborhood plan, because if you take nothing else away from this, right? If there's nothing else you're thinking about after doing this, you don't want to quantify your property on the softer side as opposed to the hard numbers. Think about the comprehensive plan, because it's a great resource that I don't think people utilize enough. I don't think it could take you half an hour literally to just pare through it and just understand what's going in and around, because it can change your decision. It can definitely make an impact on your decision. You may realize that, oh wow, I didn't realize that they're going to put a light rail stop here. I mean, maybe you do, but maybe you don't. And that's important.
Well, Chelsea, this has been great, and hopefully it's because, people, an exercise that they can do themselves. I mean, they can Google it, figure it out. There's lots of resources around SWOT analysis, but this has been, I know when we were talking and planning earlier this year, incorporating the SWOT analysis on your goals and your do list first year into the portfolio analysis process, with clients, with the spreadsheet. And so this is just iteration of it becoming actually included and incorporated in there. So this is fantastic.
Yeah, and it's definitely an extra piece we can go through in a portfolio analysis session. So if it's something that somebody wants to take a dive into and there's maybe one property they want to evaluate, we certainly can do that.
So if anyone out there, if you guys have questions about your portfolio, you want your portfolio run, sit down, reviewed by Chelsea, reach out to us. You can email just chelsea@envisionrea.com or go to the website, denverinvestmentrealestate.com, and fill out the investment consultation form. That'll come our way, and it'll go to Chelsea as well. So If you have any questions, thoughts, please reach out. If there's other topics or nuances or roadblocks that you're hitting while you're reviewing a portfolio, reach out, because we like talking about this. We like making our process better because it makes us better investors. And most importantly, it helps out our clients. So Chelsea, thank you. This has been fantastic.
Thanks for having me, Chris.